so much has changed. But actually that change had started before the pandemic. Let's be really clear. You know, before the pandemic, the people component of cybersecurity was important. Before the pandemic, it was really very much about what people did and how the decisions people make, we all make as people, rather than simply what we know, therefore how much training we can kind of cram into people. In terms of the kind of landscape changes, maybe I'd cite a few things that are particularly interesting and maybe particularly relevant to this discussion. The first one, when it comes to security, is this concept of transparency building trust. Security at its essence is all about trust, and the reality is that organizations are both expecting a level of transparency and understanding and insight into their security posture that maybe has been accelerated. People really do realize the importance of that, but also users within the organizations are also that bit more open about what is useful and not useful, especially as we kind of consider how we spend our time, more importantly. So there's a kind of transparency and openness building trust, and that's a theme that probably could be a theme of a webinar in itself. So it's a landscape change, I would note. The second one is, and the very fact we're having this webinar today as an example, is kind of this idea of security as a people endeavor. Technology is important, but the system includes people. And there has definitely been, in the past, a real idea that, you know, you could focus on one or the other, or it was literally taking from one in order to invest in the other. And the reality is the system needs to be considered, and in order to consider the system, you must consider the people. So we can maybe touch on that. That's definitely something that's accelerated as a landscape. People need more than just training. And then, of course, there are some kind of bigger macro ones. You know, the cloud is not just the present, but it's also the future for many organizations, and many organizations are using it to such great effect in terms of the way that they deliver their output and become increasingly successful, or even just sustain themselves. But actually the case is that's true when it comes to security too. And so the competitive advantage that we get from security, or could get from security as organizations, is another aspect of this changing landscape. It's not just about doing the baseline requirements, it's about using it as a competitive advantage. All of these things, I think, set a neat backdrop for the conversation we have about people.